Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2020 science fiction horror film, Possessor. Now, before I get into talking about this movie, I want to give a shout out once again to Seth for requesting this review. If there is a film, a TV show, or a topic, or a anime or cartoon series that you like to see or hear my thoughts on, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, Possessor is the second film from the twisted mind of Brandon Cronenberg, who is the son of the legendary filmmaker David Cronenberg. And this is yet another instance where Brandon showcases his inherent and innate talent to make your skin crawl. Possessor is one of those films that I'd heard about, and I was really curious and intrigued by the concept of it when it was first announced. I just didn't get around to watching it until recently. And despite some issues, overall, I was pretty satisfied with this film. I thought this film featured some genuinely spectacular and vivid and really unique and eerie visuals. The plot was definitely something you don't see every day. And there were a lot of other aspects of this film that I thought were amazing. I thought it featured some amazing performances by a fair number of the cast, and the visual effects and the practical makeup that was used here was quite stunning, as well as genuinely graphic and believable, and felt very real and visceral. And from a technical standpoint, the film is just a absolute masterwork when it comes to its cinematography, the editing, and it's just one of those movies that really does put you in awe because of Brandon's direction, as well as the overall size and scope of the film. It's a low budget movie, but it uses its low budget to the ultimate fruition in so many different ways, especially when it comes to the gore and when it comes to the core of the visuals. Because it's one of those movies that really does pride itself on some really nightmarish, insane, trippy visuals. And the film has some of the most trippy visuals you will see in a long time. Like this is prime David Cronenberg kind of stuff. So once again, Brandon is showing that he inherited a fair amount of his father's talent behind the camera. The direction here is absolutely delicious in terms of how Brandon works with different camera angles and zooms and pans to really continue to get under your skin and to unnerve the audience and take them out of their comfort zone. Uh, I love how he uses lighting and various different kinds of lighting to really emphasize the surrealness of these nightmare scenes or these hallucinations. And I love the way that he shoots any sequence that deals with graphic violence, because it doesn't hold back. It goes for the jugular. And it's a film that definitely embraces its darkness. But unlike his previous film, Antiviral, I felt that the screenplay was more consistent in terms of the characterization and the overall plot. Now, there are some issues with the script. I do feel that Brandon is a filmmaker that could benefit a lot from not having to worry about the screenplay and the story and just focus more on directing. But he did learn from some of his mistakes with Antiviral. At least this film has a character that is the focus of it in Voss, who has character depth. And there's something about this character that, despite the fact that she's doing all these horrible things, that you do in some ways sympathize with her, because you see that she has a family and you see that she's been so deep into this realm of possessing other people to take care of some really dirty work for corporations, that she doesn't really know how to act as herself. So that's something that you definitely do sympathize with. And on some level, you sympathize with the man who is possessed by Voss, Colin, because of the fact that he's being controlled against his will and his body is being used as a vessel for murder. And you definitely do feel for him in some capacity as a result. So there are some sympathetic characters. And not only that, there are other characters that are featured in the film, like Colin's girlfriend, uh, Ava, that really do make you feel like there are characters here that have souls, that have beating hearts. They don't feel like they're extensions of machinery, like the characters in Antiviral. Also, Possessor doesn't really attempt to try to be a satire of any specific kind of culture or aspect of society. So it also doesn't suffer from the issue that Antiviral did, where it wasn't quite as funny as it could have been in terms of its satirical elements. Possessor is a much more straightforward, serious horror film in a lot of ways. I mean, science fiction film first, but the horror is definitely still there because of the idea of someone possessing and controlling your body and using it as a tool for destruction. Now, that's nothing new because you have things like the possession movies and The Exorcist, but Possessor takes the possession film angle and turns it completely on its head and adds a science fiction element to everything that's genuinely unique and different. And the world that it creates feels very real. It seems like something that isn't that far-fetched or too far from reality, but the world itself is another thing that I think this script was a little lacking on in terms of fleshing out the overall landscape. It's one of those films where it left me wanting more in terms of why are people using this technology to possess people and kill certain targets? Why are hitmen obsolete? That's never explained. And why does this technology exist? Who funded it? So on and so forth. A lot of that stuff isn't explained at all. So you feel kind of out of the loop at times. And despite the fact that it does have more sympathetic characters, it isn't as strong as it could be in that regard, because with Colin, for instance, you barely get to know this guy at all before he gets possessed by Voss. So that makes the sequences after the deed is done, when Voss takes care of what she was asked to do by her employer, kind of slow and not nearly as engaging as the rest of the film, because it's about this battle between Voss and Colin, in this fight over Colin's body. And the fact that you don't really know that much about Colin other than he was dating his boss's daughter, that whole series of sequences falls a little flat. But despite that, the film absolutely delivers when it comes to its grueling and just really um, sick visuals and attention to detail. And I just love the fact that Brandon Cronenberg on purpose decided to do as much of the film's visual uh, tricks as practically as possible, and shot on camera and not in a computer. And it just makes these sequences where faces are blending together and warping and all this other stuff even more unsettling, because of the fact that it's mostly done for real. Um, and there's a lot of visuals in this that remind me of the top-notch work by Ken Russell in Altered States. And that's a great thing because that film has some really striking visuals. And I could see why some people might find it a little empty because of what I was saying. Voss is sympathetic at first, but once she becomes obsessed with killing and with pleasing her mentor, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, um, then she starts to lose a lot of her humanity, and in the process, you really don't care as much about the character anymore. It does ultimately become a tragedy because of how everything unfolds and what she's willing to sacrifice to be the killer that Girder wants her to be. But it's one of those things, though, where despite that, it doesn't really hook you in the same way as David Cronenberg's The Fly, for instance, with Seth Brundle's character. Uh, and with Colin, like I said, otherwise, there's really not much of a connection that's ever built with him because you barely get to even know him as a person. So, despite all of that, the film still is a gripping and powerful and quite strong experience as a fan of film and filmmaking, due to the hallucination sequences, like when Voss is being overpowered by Colin's spirit or his mind, and he crushes her head and then wears it as a skin. And all these sequences that we saw earlier in the film featuring Voss or Colin are now warped in this really demented way because you have Colin wearing her face. And it's a really creepy, fucked up visual. And it's something straight out of uh, the realm of body horror. And the film has some really bloody, gory scenes that are definitely not for the squeamish. Uh, there's a knifing early on in the film, which is just incredibly bloody. There are other sequences that involve beatings and mutilations that are definitely going to make you wince. I mean, there's a sequence with Sean Bean, who plays Colin's boss in this film, where he gets beat with a crowbar, and this is while Voss is controlling Colin's body, and Voss, while she's in Colin's body, takes this crowbar and shoves it down his throat and right into his mouth. And then you see a shot where he pulls the crowbar out of his mouth, and you see the teeth bend and like break as the crowbar is being pulled out. Like, oh man, God, like as someone who's had a lot of teeth work done, that was really kind of triggering for me. Like that definitely made me cringe. And then there are other moments of violence that are really shocking. The bloodbath at the end, uh, it absolutely did not let up in terms of the violence. It's a shootout that involves a kid who slices a guy's throat, and then the kid gets shot not only in the chest but gets shot in the head. And it's all done practically with makeup effects. There's no CGI, there's no CGI blood, and it's so much more effective as a result. It's one of those holy fucking shit moments. So there are a lot of scenes in this that will make you go like, God damn. I mean, and that is really the film's biggest strength. It's not with its characters, because those could use some work. It's not with the way that the plot necessarily unfolds. It's not really about the concept as a whole, although the concept as a whole is still quite strong. A different take on the possession film. But where the film really shines is with its visuals and with its violence. And with the moments where it just has really giant titanic swinging balls, like the sequence where Voss goes to work in Colin's body, and he's taking part in this job, which is the ultimate invasion of privacy. It's funded by corporations, and you got people who are cogs in a machine watching cam footage of people while they're just doing their daily routine, while they're having sex with their significant other. And the whole point is to see what kind of blinds or drapes they have in the background so that they can market uh, those kinds of drapes or blinds to those people directly. If anything, that honestly might be the scariest thing about this movie. It's not really the trippy, nightmarish visuals or the idea of somebody controlling your body. Although honestly, that is pretty terror. I would say it's a tie. It's a tie for me. Between the extreme invasion of privacy funded by corporations. Can you imagine? I'd be talking into this webcam right now, and Logitech or Amazon would be spying on my ass and using all the whatever they see to advertise certain products to me and get money out of my pocket. Uh, so that is pretty terrifying in terms of how real that potential future could be. I could totally see that happening. Just like I could see something happening where technology advances to the point where it's abused and used for murder. So you have people who were technically innocent, who didn't do anything wrong, but their body was used as a vessel for these horrible crimes, and they are the ones that are going to pay for it, while the people that did the crimes get away with it. So, yeah, it's a tie between the two. Both are really terrifying concepts. And both are, for the most part, uh, well realized at the end of the day. There are some other elements to this film that I definitely want to mention. Of course, the performances by most of the cast, specifically Andrea Riseborough as Tasia Voss. She was already an actress that I had on my radar after her remarkable work in Mandy. And she continues that rare form here with a very uh, intense and really quite eerie and haunting performance, because her dedication to this character is absolutely apparent. And I feel that she does such a great job creating these characters and bringing them to life in her own way, that have these tortured souls, that there are things about them that you can tell that they've been through a lot, and that they're losing grip on who they are and their idea of reality. And I feel that Andrea is quite amazing when it comes to portraying those kind of characters. So I thought she was a perfect bit of casting for this role. And once this character fully embraces this mindset of a killer, she was downright horrifying when she is completely stripping away whatever is left of her family and whatever connections she has left to the real world. And the other cast members also hold their own well, specifically Jennifer Jason Leigh as her boss. One of her best performances in years. She was fantastic. Christopher Abbott as Colin Tate, he was fine. He did what he was asked to do fairly well. I felt when he was supposed to portray Voss and his body, I felt that he really shined in that regard. But when it comes to other sequences where he's just being himself, it was a little flat. But that, I don't think that's really his fault. I think that's more something that the screenplay is to blame for, not really the actor. Sean Bean's in this, and surprisingly, he doesn't die as John Parse. Uh, he did his job well too. Played an asshole boss who you really, honestly, did want to see him get his ass kicked. And Tuppence Middleton as Ava. A lot of ways you could argue she was the main connection to any sort of depth that Colin had, and she tried to make this character stand out, but at the end of the day, it was just your typical girlfriend. There really wasn't anything that special about it. But then again, I'm not going to blame Tuppence because she was given what she had to work with from the start, and it wasn't much. The rest of the cast, they also did decent jobs, but I would have to say the main cast members you see the most of are Andrea Riseborough, uh, Christopher Abbott, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. The film also features a score by Jim Williams, and I felt the score was, for the most part, really nothing that special. A lot of it's just droning and in the background. There were some aspects of the score, though, that I thought were pretty effective. But for the most part, it was a pretty forgettable score to me. A lot of it was just there to be extra bits of mood and atmosphere for certain scenes. It definitely isn't something along the lines of Howard Shore's work in The Fly or some of the other films that David Cronenberg has done. Um, and I brought up David Cronenberg because Brandon is his son, and I think that's one thing that I think Brandon can improve on a little, is finding a composer that brings to the fold a more memorable, a more captivating, a more emotional score. Because Possessor's score was pretty empty to me personally. Uh, the cinematography, though, by Karim Hussein, absolutely stupendous in so many different ways. I just love the way this film is shot. It's a gorgeous looking film. And The editing by Matthew Hannum also very honorable, and it's one of those things where there are a lot of sequences in this because of the editing and the way that things are cut have even more of a visceral impact, even more of a punch because of how unorthodox the editing is. And for a film that's 104 minutes, I felt that it went by at a pretty decent pace. Like I said, it did suffer from some slowdown and some pacing issues uh, when you got to the point where it was just trying to focus on the struggle between Colin and Voss over Colin's body due to the reasons that I detailed. But it still kept my interest. So it wasn't one of those things where, even though it slowed down in terms of its pacing, that I was completely out of it or I lost connection uh, totally with the story and how it's unfolding. So yeah, I would say Possessor is a very peculiar, a very strange, a very wild, and absolutely batshit insane film. But if this is the kind of content that intrigues you, I 100% recommend you checking Possessor out. I think that this is the kind of filmmaking that I want to see more of. The filmmaking that takes risks, that isn't trying to lecture you, isn't trying to uh, put anyone on a pedestal for whatever reason. It's just telling a really interesting and intriguing story in a fairly unique way with some striking visuals and impressive technical feats. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Possessor, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.